New section is choosing the mix of input. So that is derived from a cost minimization problem, as I said before. Producers may choose different amount of factors of production used to make Q1 or Q2. Their choice depends on the wage paid to labor and rental rate R, paid when renting capital. As the wages W increase relative to the rental rate, W over R increase. In other words, producers use less labor and more capital in the production of both goods. Okay? So I'd like to graph. Think about cost minimization problem. Minimizing cost, rewriting cost function, K1 or K2, right? Ki is equal to C over R minus W over R Li, right? Because when the market is perfectly competitive like this, right? And if you want Q1 is, for example, Q1 star, right? So this one can be represented by this kind of graph, Li, Ki. There are lots of ways to produce L1, K, okay. Q1, L1, K1 is Q1 star. You can draw this kind of isoquant. Right? Isoquant, we study isoquant. Q1 is equal to Q1 star. Q1 star. If you want to produce, for example, Q1 star is 100 pence of pizza. There are lots of ways to produce 100 pence of pizza like this. Right? That is this one. And cost function, we can draw lots of cost function having slope W over R. For example, like this. We can draw lots of some isocost line like this, right? If you choose this point to produce 100 pence of pizza, you combine this amount of labor, this amount of capital. Or this point, this amount of labor, this amount of capital like this, right? But there exists only one cost minimizing labor and capital combination to produce 100 pence of pizza, right? That did happen at this point, right? We already studied that. Cost minimizing solution is this one, right? This point, right? That is, anyway, this one. Now, wage rate increase. Then, slope of ISO value line increase, right? Changes. Then you have to solve value maximization problem again with different slope of ISO value line. For example, like this. W over R increase, then like this. ISO cost line is changed like this. Then, new point of cost minimizing point to produce 100 pence of pizza is here. Right? Changes. So from here, what happened? W over R increase, right? Then this is L, that is K. Right? So, for example, 100 labor and 20 capital oven. Right? Originally that is 100 labor and 20 oven. But now here, what is the meaning of this? Labor employment is 50, capital employment is 40, like this. W over R increase, that is L over K. Right? Then what happened? Moving relative wage rate, that kind of thing happened. In other words, labor capital in sector I, sector 1 over 2, decrease. We know this kind of relations. Relative wage rate increase, wage rate expensive, more expensive than before. Then you, pizza restaurant owners, want to cook pizza with different factor combination. Right? You use less labor than before because labor cost increase, right? And you use more capital oven to produce 100 pence of pizza. So L1 over Li over Ki decrease, right? So that happened, then Li over Ki decrease. We know this, right? From here, we know we can graph this kind of thing. For example, that is L over L1, K1. And that is relative wage rate. Then what happened? Relative wage rate, when starting from here, then L over K over is like this. 1 L1 over K1. That was 100 divided by 20 originally, right? Now, relative wage rate increase. From now, new relative wage rate is here. Relative wage rate increase. Then L1 over K1 is 50 over 40, for example, like this, right? That is L1 ending, how can I say? That is 0, L1, K11, like this. Moving this way. Factor combination, relative wage rate increase. Then labor capital combination changes. Okay? So if we connect these 2 points, we can get this kind of graph. Right? That kind of thing in Q1 production. Right? Like this. We can draw this kind of graph. Now, so our textbook said that is CC curve. In our notation, one-on curve. C means clothing, isn't it? Right? Relationship between relative wage rate and labor capital employment, labor capital ratio. We can find negative relations in good one. Okay? Now, at this point, you can think about FF curve or Tutu curve. Right? Then, that should be like this. FF or Tutu curve is like this. Why? Shape is the same anyway. Relative wage rate increase in hamburger production. Then, hamburger restaurant owners want to cook hamburger, same quantity of hamburger with more labor, less labor and more capital oven. Because relative wage rate increase. Right? But, so negative relations. But FF curve or Tutu curve is inside of CC curve or one-on curve. Why? Because Q1 is labor intensive, Q2 is capital intensive. Look at this. Okay. L1 over T1 are higher than L2 over T2. When these two production face same relative wage rate. Right? So wage rate is W over R0. Right? That is L1 over K1. And that is, for example, blue one is L2 over K2. Okay? Wage rate increase, then same thing happen. Right? Hamburger restaurant produce same goods with more land, more capital, and less labor. Right? That is L2, K2 dash, for example. So, moving this way. In Q2 production, labor capital ratio decrease from here to here, here to here. In sector 1, here to here. Okay? That is explanation of CC curve and FF curve. Anyway, this CC curve and FF curve usually derived from cost minimization problem. Okay? I already explained that. And FF curve located inward of CC curve. Why? C production or Q1 production is labor intensive, facing same relative wage rate, Q1 production use more labor than capital compared with hamburg production, right? So FF cap inside of CC cup, like this, right? So we can draw like this. And I already explained that just for L1 over T1, relative intensity condition set, Q1 production is labor intensive, Q2 production is capital intensive, right? That means L1 over T1 greater than L2 over T2, right? And I said this divided by Q1 and right-hand side divided by Q2, we can get these relations, AL1 over AT1 greater than AL2 AT2. Okay, what's the meaning of this? In cost minimization, right? For example, in Q2 production, that is iso cost line, right? Iso cost line, and that is Q2 star. Q2 is Q2 star. There are lots of ways to produce L2, K2 or T2 like this, right? Like this. Oh, I forgot what I wanted to explain. Like this. That is K2, Q2. And Q2 star is, for example, 10 hamburg, right? Then we know we can find that is, what is this? That is L2 star. That is K2 star. Okay? Or now you, in cost minimization, you want to produce only one Q1, right? Then you can graph like this. Regraph like this, right? For example, Q1 is 1, right? Q2 is 1, that is L2 and K2. We can draw and cost minimization solution happen at this point. Right? So Q2 is 1. Then labor required to produce 1 Q1. What is this? That is definition of AL1, isn't it? Right? Then y-axis similarly changed to AL2, that is AK2. Because Q2 equal 1 instead of 100 or 1000. Right? Unit, then x-axis is labor requirement in Q2 production. Y-axis is capital requirement, unit capital requirement to produce 1 Q2. Okay? So that then shape is like this. Can you understand? Right? So this one also can be applied here. Right? So we can rewrite this one, L1 over K1 and L2 over K2 can be changed, AL1 over AK1 and AL2 over AK2. Okay? Then this one is AL1 over AKA1 at point 0 when relative wage rate is W over R 0. Right? And L2 over K2 is equal to AL2 over AK2 when relative wage rate is this one. Okay? Now, relative wage rate increased to W over R slash, right? Then AL1 over AKA1 dash. That is AL2 over AK2 dash. Okay? Anyway, same. Only X variable and horizontal and vertical variable changes. So in our textbook, that is labor input per calorie, AL2, AK1, like this. Right? In cost minimization problem, that is usually we say L2, K2, L1, K1 in cost minimization problem, right? But if Q1 is equal, Q2 is equal to only 1, then we can rewrite AL2, AK2 in cost minimization solution, right? A farmer can produce a calorie of food, 1 unit of food with less capital if he or she uses more labor and vice versa. So, assuming that at any given factor price, Q1 production use more labor relative to capital than Q2 production. That factor intensity condition is needed. So we already know that AL1 over AK1 higher than AL2 over AK2 because Q1 is labor intensive, Q2 is relatively capital intensive. Okay? Or simply talking L1 over K1 greater than L2 over K2. This condition. Right? Production of clothes is relatively labor intensive, while production of food is relatively land or capital intensive. Relative factor demand curve for clothes, CC, rise outside that for food, FF. I already explained. Right? CC curve is outside of FF curve or tutu curve. Right? At any given wage rental ratio, Q1 production use a higher labor capital ratio. When this is the case, we say that Q1 is labor intensive and that Q2 is capital intensive. So intensity condition is fully explained in this section 2. Okay, now we go next slide, next section. Okay, now we go factor price and goods price. In a competitive market, the price of goods should equal its cost of production, which depends on factor price. How changes in the wage and rent affect the cost of producing a good depends on the mix of factor used. An increase in the rental rate of capital should affect the price of food more than the price of clothes, since food is capital-intensive industry. So change in W over R are closely tied to changes in P1 over P2. Okay? So now think about, in a competitive market, the price of goods should equal cost of production, right? Price of goods should equal its cost of production. Now think about profit maximization condition, right? Total revenue is equal to total cost, isn't it? Total revenue is equal, in Q1 case, P1, Q1, that is total revenue. Should be equal to total cost when the market is perfectly competitive, right? So profit should be equal to 0. So total cost, total revenue, total cost is WL1 plus RK1, isn't it? Right? When the market is perfectly competitive, we can get this kind of thing. We set zero profit condition. Both sides divided by Q1. Then what happened? P1 left and W L1 over Q1 plus R K1 over Q2, isn't it? Right? And L1 over Q1 is AL1. K1 over Q1 is equal to AK1. Right? So rewriting this, P1 is AL1 wage rate plus AK1R. We can get this kind of thing. Right? Similarly, P2 is equal to, we following same procedure. P2 is AL2W plus AK2R. We can get this kind of relations. Right? Now, think about what happened after trade. Our earlier conclusion is price of relative comparative advantage would increase and price of comparative disadvantage would decrease. Home has comparative advantage in Q1 and comparative disadvantage in Q2. Okay? That means P1 increase, right? P1 increase and P2 decrease. That kind of thing happens, isn't it? Right? P1 increase and P2 decrease. That kind of thing happens, right? Or now think about production function. Anyway, home countries, production of Q1 increase after trade, right? Production of comparative advantage would increase. Increase in Q1 is L1 and K1. That means L1 also increase and K1 also increase, right? Also, Q2 is L2 and K2. Decrease in Q2 because Q2 is comparative disadvantage. That means demand for labor in sector 2 decrease, capital demand decrease. That kind of thing happen. Then, what happened? Demand for labor is L1 plus L2, isn't it? Right? L1 increase, but L2, demand for labor in sector 2 decrease. In sum, demand for labor increase or decrease in home? Increase. Why? Q1 is labor intensive. Q2 is capital intensive, labor scarce. Okay? So this pressure decrease in labor demand smaller than this one. Demand for labor increases in sector 1, overwhelms decreasing demand for labor in sector 2. So in other words, labor demand increase after trade. Demand increase, and if labor supply L bar same, then wage rate should increase. Right? So after trade, wage rate increase. We know this. Okay? Also think about rental rate of land. Capital demand in sector 1 increase because Q1 increase. Capital demand in sector 2 decrease because Q2 decrease. So which one is stronger than the other? Demand. This one or this one? This one. Why? Capital. Q1 is capital demand. Q1 is labor. This one is, in other words, this one is stronger, but that is not so strong. Increasing demand in sector 1 is not so high because Q1 is capital labor intensive, right? And L2 decrease, K2 decrease, but this one is more stronger than this. Why? Q2 is capital intensive. Then in total, demand for capital decrease in home after trade. Okay? So if supply same, demand decrease, then wage rate should decrease. We can see. After trade, simply talking, W over R increase after trade. In other words, W over R autarky trade greater than W over R autarky. This kind of thing happens. Can you understand? For simplest purpose, we think wage rate increased by 10%, right? And rental rate of capital decreased by 10% or minus 10%. Then what happened? We use this one. Wage rate increased by 10%, right? Here, wage rate increased by 10%. Capital, right? Rental rate of capital decreased by 10%, minus 10%. Right? Then what happened in the price of udon? Price of udon increase or decrease? Think about this. Wage rate increased by 10%, capital decreased by 10%, then price of udon increase or decrease? This one increase. Why? Q1 is labor intensive. So magnitude of AL1 greater than AK1. Labor is more important input in Q1 production, isn't it? Right? So same percent increase, same percent decrease, but this one larger than this, so P1 increase. For example, increase by 5%. Right? What happened in price of good two? Wage rate increased by 10%. Same in one country. This one decreased by 10%. Then price of good two increase or decrease? Decrease. Why? AK2 greater than AL2. Because Q2 is capital intensive or land intensive. Right? So, for example, that is 0.7, that is 0.1, for example. Minus 10% multiplied by 0.7 and plus 10% multiplied by 0.1%. then this one is decrease. Can you understand? So P2 decrease. In other words, P1 over P2 increase. More exactly talking, P1, P2 after trade higher than P1, P2 at autarky. This condition satisfied. P1 over P2 increase. Why that happen? Now think about wage rate, relative wage rate increase. Right? Then P1 over P2 increase. And vice versa. P1 over P2 increase. Then W over R also increase. So, relative goods price and relative factor price ties tightly. Right? So, one-to-one positive relationship with P1 over P2 and W over R. Can you understand? So, graphically, this one is like this. Now, that is A, that is T. And Y variable is P1 over P2. Right? In autarky situation, wage rate, relative wage rate is W over R, A. Right? Then P1 over P2, A. Right? One-to-one relationship between relative goods price and relative factor price. After that, P1 over P2 increase to P1, P2, T after trade price, increase from here to here. Then what happened in factor price? Factor price also increase. For example, like this. Right? 이거 내가 잘못 그렸네. That is P1, P2, T. Then this one. So this point and this point. Then we can get this kind of graph. This kind of graph. Right? That is Stolper-Samuelson curve in our textbook. Right? So changes in W over R are tied to changing P1 over P2. Graphically, one-to-one relationship between relative price and relative goods price. Okay? So graphically like this. Here, X variable is W over R, Y variable is P1 over P2. And because close production is labor intensive, while production is capital intensive, the higher the relative cost of labor, the higher must be the relative price of labor intensive good. Actually, P1 over P2 is a relative price of Q1, or relative price of labor intensive sector. Right? W over R is relative cost of urban intensive factor in Q1 production. Okay? Then this one. Now think about Y variable is here and X variable. Now upside down. That is X variable. That is Y variable. Then we can get that graph. We already graph here. Right? When Y variable is W over R, X variable is P1 over P2. Can you understand? That is SS curve, Stolper-Samuelson curve. Okay? One-to-one relationship between relative goods price and relative factor price. Okay? Stolper-Samuelson theorem. That is important theorem of price version of actual model, right? If the relative price of good increase after trade, relative price of comparative advantage would increase. In case of Korea, P1 over P2 increase. Then what happened? Real wage of the factor used intensively in the production of Q1 increase. Right? The real wage. Then W over R with relative factor price upon intensive in Q1 increase. W over R increase. While rental rate of capital, rental rate of land decrease. Intensively used comparative disadvantage good. Okay? That is Stolper-Samuelson theory. So any change in the relative price of good alters distribution of income. Graphically, this one. We already studied this one, right? In autarky situation, okay, I'd write this one. Again, we already know that this one is actually L1 over K1 at autarky. When relative wage rate is autarky price, right? Then labor capital ratio in sector 1 is like this, right? And relative labor capital ratio in sector 2 in autarky was like this. At this point, this one and this one, right? The autarky price. After trade, this one increased. Relative price of comparative advantage good increased. Same thing happened even in Ricardian model, right? Then what happened? Relative wage rate increased to W over RT after trade. In this process, what happened? There is blue one. That is L1 over K1T, right? And this point means L2 over K2T. Okay? So we know that P1 over P2 increase after trade, relative price of comparative advantage would increase, then relative wage rate increase because this country has a comparative advantage in labor intensive sector, right? W over R increase. Then labor capital ratio in sector 1 decrease from L1 K1A to L1 K1T. At the same time, L2 over K2, labor capital ratio in sector 2, right? Moving to here to here. Can you understand? Right? That is graph figure 7.5. If the price of clothes rises, relative price of comparative good rises, the wage rental ratio must rise. This one happened, and this one happened. This will cause a labor capital ratio used in the production of good on and good to decrease from here to here. Okay? From here to, in this graph, L1 K1, L1 K1T. L1 LC over KC2 is L1 over K2, K1T. Okay, so moving here to here. And sector 2, this one to, this one. This one to this one. And sector 2, L2K2A, L2K2A, that is L2K2T. So moving from here to here. Got it? So sometimes I'll ask you in midterm exam, you graph everything. Right? This graph. But I really want to check your knowledge, full understanding of this. So sometimes P1 over P2, this variable changes like this. Or sometimes this one is R over W instead of W over R. Or sometimes that is L1K, Li-Ki. Sometimes this one is Ki-Li. Okay? Then anyway, the shape of graph changed totally. So you practice this one to prepare midterm exam. And so an increase in the relative price of Q1, P1 over P2 is predicted to raise income of workers relative to that of capital owners. Simply talking, the W over R increase, right? Relative income, raise income of workers, relative income of workers increase. How do we know this? We know W over R increase there, right? W is labor income. R is capital income. W over R increase. The relative workers' income increase, right? The raise income of workers relative to that of capital owners increase. We know this. Raise the ratio of capital to labor services. K over L, L over K decrease. So we know that L1, K1, and L2, K2 drop. In other words, K over L, K1 over L1 increase, K2 over L1, K2 over L2 increase, right? So that is KL is KILI. If we stick on earlier graph, this one should be changed. L1, Li over Ki decrease. Okay? Raise the real income of workers and lower. Anyway, W over R increase. That means relative income increase. But more important than that is this. Raise the real income of laborers and lower real income of capital owners. Then what is real income? And right? So I'd like to explain this. This one is W over R is just relative income. Real income of labor is W over P. Right? Real income of landowners is R over P. Can you understand? And think about one factor model. I'm sorry, not one factor model. Optimal factor demand condition. What is this? Wage rate should be equal to price of the good multiplied by MPL. Okay? And rental rate of R is price of the good multiplied by MPK, isn't it? From here, this one moving there, then W over P is equal to MPL. Right? Here, P, price, moving on the left-hand side, relative real income of landowners. That is equal to MPK. Right? So, real income of workers increase means MPL increase. Marginal product of labor increase. Then we say real income of workers increase. Real income of labor increase. So our textbook says this one decrease. Relative income of landowners decrease. That means MPK decrease. Right? MPK decrease. Then why that happen? That is the really important thing. Well, why real wage rate increase or marginal product of labor increase? Now think about Q1 is pizza restaurant, right? Marginal product of pizza increase. Why that happen? Why that happen? Why that happen? Right? So when we move in otaki to trade, right? So relative wage rate increase. Then in cost minimization problem, we know that, right? In cost minimization solution, wage rate increase. So you can produce less labor and more capital over. In other words, one labor, right, combined with more capital over to produce pizza, right? Capital over increase, more capital, one labor combined with more capital over, right? Then marginal product of labor increases, isn't it? Okay, some problem? Then I'd like to explain very quickly for this kind of thing. Production function of labor. That is Q1, function of Q1, L1, and K1, for example. K1 is fixed at 100, like this. That is Q1, that is L1, isn't it? From here, you can derive marginal product of labor. L1, changing Q1 over changing L1. That is MPL1. Then we know MPL1 is like this. Q1 is function of labor and capital over. In the short run, capital over is fixed at 100, like this. Right? So marginal product of labor is also function of capital stock, function of capital. Right? And capital is 100. Then we can draw this kind of marginal product of labor curve. Now, after trade, what happened? This one increased to 200 instead of 100. You can cook pizza with 200 pence of pizza. Then production function shift above like this. That is Q1T, Q1A, Otaki production function. That is after trade production function because capital increase, right? Then what happened in marginal product curve? Shift upward. That is NPKT. Anyway, all the labor fully, that is L bar. All the labor supply employed in, for example, this sector. Then what happened? Marginal product of labor increase. Anyway, like this. Because of this, marginal product of labor increase, real income of labor increase. Okay, if we use this kind of thing in capital function, for example, X variable is capital, production function is capital, and labor is just 200 person like this. If we expand this kind of story, same. Production function after trade shift downward. NPK decrease, so real income of landowners are losers. Okay, in Hexa-Olin model, there are winners and losers, quite different from Ricardian model. Ricardian model, wage rate increase, you calculated in numerical example, right? But not anymore here. Workers' income, real income, marginal product of labor increase. At the same time, marginal product of capital decrease. Real income of capital owners, land owners decrease. There exist winners and losers. Okay? I'd like to explain a little more. Anyway, this is a basic story of, core story of price version of a Hexa-Olin model. Right? In one graph, we said this one. P1 over P2 increase after trade. Relative price of comparative advantage would increase. Then relative factor price. Right? Relative factor price intensively used in comparative advantage would increase. The W bar increasing. So moving this way. Then capital labor capital ratio decrease or capital labor ratio combination increase. Okay? And W over increase at the same time MPL increase. So W over price, real wage rate increase, real rental rate decrease. So there are winners and losers. Winners are laborers, losers are landowners. In other words, labor is abundant factor in Korea, right? So owners of abundant factors are winners. At the same time, owners of scarce factors are losers. Sometimes in the midterm exam, so that is also Korea case. Graph in Australian case, right? You can derive everything like this. In Australia, it's land abundant country. So after free trade, landowners should be winners. MPT increase, right? But laborers are losers of free trade. That kind of thing happen. Winners and losers exist in this Hexa-Olin model, quite differently from Ricardian model. Okay? And this is price version of Hexa-Olin model. Anyway, Stolper-Samuelson SS curve is very important, right? The relationship between relative price of comparative advantage good and relative factor price, right? SS curve. That is price version of Hexa-Olin model. And next class, we study quantity version of Hexa-Olin model. We said Lipczynski's theory. I'd like to stop here.